Welcome to the Supplier Diversity and Inclusion Podcast by Fips Consulting. In this podcast, I speak with international guests who share their experience on supplier diversity and inclusion. Today, I speak to Edina da Silva, founder and CEO of NeuroSpecial. Edina, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Andrea, thank you so much for inviting me.
Edina, we met in Paris at the We Connect International European Conference last year, and I was so impressed by the speech you provided. I mean, you share your own very personal story and also how you founded your business. So let's start with why and when did you start your business, NeuroSpecial?
Thank you for that lovely introduction. So I founded NeuroSpecial last year, actually, but it has been something I have been thinking about for the past couple of years before that, and essentially kind of gave all my focus to it, I think pretty much just before we met in Paris. And the why behind it is essentially I had been working in corporate environment and in leadership position as a head of software testing for 15 years, and I really struggled with different cultures and different organizational cultures. And so in some organizational cultures I really thrived, and I never really knew the reason for it. I always gave my all. My motivation was the same, the entry into the role was the same, my conversations and the way I would relate to people were very much the same. But somewhere along the line, it either turned out to be hugely successful because I was a consultant, so I was at different organizations dependent on the project length, or it wasn't so successful and I ended up resigning much earlier than the project itself would run. And I only found out really the kind of the reason for that when my daughter was diagnosed with ADHD combined with autism. And just like many people who hear about autism and associate it with little boys who are unable to speak or, verbally challenged, found out that there is such a phenomenon as female autism. And after my daughter's diagnosis, I have sought diagnosis and found out that I have autism itself. But women are very good at masking it and unintentionally, so they will end up being diagnosed with depression, potentially bipolar disorder, anxiety, all of these labels I also got throughout my life. And they will be prescribed with different medication or different strategies, but nothing to do with autism. And once I found out, I kind of really honed in on how to help myself and find strategies. And really all then it made sense, certain things in the workplace, what was challenging for me, dependent on the culture of the organization. And then the mission came, or my purpose came, is that I never wanted anybody to feel the same way as I felt in an organization. And that's essentially about inclusion and about understanding not necessarily just neurodiverse individuals, but also understanding how we can be more open to create a culture in organizations where adaptations are something what people feel brave enough and feel safe enough to ask for. And the other kind of social mission is to help parents to be aware of this condition in girls, and to make sure that they know the route to seek diagnosis, but also know what strategies they can use to help create a calmer life at home.
Wow, yeah, it's not easy to actually determine what it is that brought you these challenges in the workplace, right?
Yes, definitely. And I think the difficulty is that apart from the bias and the misunderstanding, and there are a lot of discussions around, and I hear a lot of people saying, well, everybody is a little bit on the spectrum and everybody has a little bit of an ADHD, and we are just talking about it more. And it's actually the message shouldn't be lost that this existed before as well. It's just that we are aware of it now. That doesn't mean that we are all on a spectrum, or that we all have ADHD, because the real challenges in life actually really present themselves. And, although I'm grateful for who I am, and it led me to the career and led me to my, academic and career decisions, definitely helped me. And, being hyper focused, and being able to drive things and being really detail orientated, they all definitely helped me on my career path. That doesn't mean that these are not real challenges we face, people who are autistic or who have ADHD.
Right. It feels like it's a trend. Now everybody has ADHD and some kind of autism spectrum, but it's not a trend. It's always been there, but it's just hasn't been diagnosed. And maybe you can share a bit more in detail how it impacted your work life when you were employed.
Yeah, I could do that, of course. So I think one of the examples I definitely use, when we are doing training courses, because we try to use real life scenarios, but also, in some of my keynote talks, is how I started as a junior tester in my corporate career. And as a junior software tester, I was given a task to do. And it's very much kind of a silo activity where I'm testing software. And then I may have to jump on one, maybe two meetings a day. Sometimes, dependent on the project, but sometimes maybe just 1-2 meetings a week, really. And didn't really have to interact with a lot of people. But the phenomenon of masking, it also means that I am socially so aware of how to communicate and how to, do a lot of the social communication part, that people perceive it as like I'm very outgoing, and they believe that I enjoy talking to people, which I do to an extent. But it does mean that I'm naturally sometimes being pushed towards leadership positions. And so very quickly, kind of being a junior software tester, after probably 10 months, they offered me a test manager role. And of course, being detail orientated, having good organizational skills, and being kind of like just looking for the solution rather than focusing on a problem, are all things why I was thriving in a leadership position. But the downside of that is, the higher I got on the career ladder, the more people I had to manage, meant the more people I had to talk to on a daily basis. And in between a social activity, now that I know myself, I would say I need maybe like a day when I have a quiet day. So even now, while I'm running my own business, I tend to space out meetings so that I have days when I'm kind of recharging. And if I wouldn't do that, I would get really tearful towards the end of the evening. I could have, I don't want to call it a meltdown, but I could have like a burnout and get really upset for the smallest things, and things really start bothering me. I'm quite hypersensitive to noises, and that will make it worse. So yes, I think just showing how I may push myself into, positions at work, but not necessarily know how to manage it, because I have to put on a different mask essentially at work, and then I have to let it out somewhere that I'm overwhelmed. So that's probably one of the areas where I found challenges.
Thank you so much for sharing that personal insights. And I think it's so important that you then start your own business, NeuroSpecial, really helping companies to create awareness on neurodiversity and employers with neurodiversity. So, what do you think is the most important thing that companies should know about neurodiversity in their employees, or neurodiversity overall?
Well, I I have been slightly readjusting to the understanding of that, because when I speak to leadership teams, or we are trying to or we are training teams on neurodiversity, or line managers, if the language is just based on neurodiversity, I feel there are two main challenges with that. Number one is that there are a lot of people out there, and that generation, who is not diagnosed. And so they don't really know how to ask for adaptations because they themselves don't know that they have neurodiversity. Those people in the teams, they usually perceived as like the difficult one, the not sociable, the one who, we can't talk to him because he's just disruptive. So there is that one part where they obviously don't know about their neurodiversity, so they can't really ask for adaptations because they don't know what adaptations they would need. And then the second group of people is definitely the ones who are aware of their neurodiversity, but they are worried to ask for adaptations because it's not so clear. If I have a wheelchair, I know I need a ramp. When I'm in a position, so for example, just to use my real life position, obviously I worked in IT, and stand up and having Kanban boards and discussions in the mornings at 9 o'clock, stand up as soon as you jump and open your laptop. That's just the way IT projects, a lot of them are being run because you are being agile and you are, developing software. To me, as soon as I open my laptop, having to have a social conversation with somebody without being able to prepare for it causes a huge anxiety. But would I be brave enough to say to my manager, well, listen, I know that 9 people out of the 10 people in the team are happy to go on a 9 o'clock call, but actually, I find it really difficult. Can we move that call to 10 o'clock if everybody is happy with it? Or can I sometimes maybe not take part or have my camera off? How would other people perceive me in that team? Would they then think, well, she's not a team player? And actually, another example is when I was physically in the workplace just before COVID, and a lot of the time I walked away from the team where I was sitting with, and I would sit with my computer in the canteen or somewhere where I wasn't tied to have a conversation. And that made it look like either I'm not doing my job or I'm not a team player. And neither of them was true. But would I be brave enough to say, well, this is what I need? Not necessarily. It's quite a lot of companies where I think the work culture is not necessarily yet there, where people feel open enough to talk. And I think that the message there is not necessarily the neurodiversity, but that how can you enable your line managers or the leadership team to be role models for inclusion, where you are really safe to say, this is might be something I need, and not because I'm neurodiverse, but because I will work more productively that way.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think there's probably a lot of companies who thinks, well, we don't need that, right? We don't have any employees with a neurodiversity, but I think that's a big challenge because people might not speak up. They might not even be diagnosed. They might not even know themselves, like you did at the very beginning. They just feel like this is too much sometimes for me, or this is what I can cope with. And that's why I think it's so important that you do that work and really share what neurodiversity is, how it looks like in a workplace, and also educate companies on actions they can take to make everyone feel inclusive in the workplace.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think, even without the diagnosis, the real message is how to drive empathy and understanding and be more open to not necessarily putting people in the same box. Essentially, everybody has their, maybe they are not neurodiverse, but everybody has their preferences, and you want to get the best out of your team, and you want to get the best out of your employees. And so for that, you have to be able to be open to adjustments. But for that adjustments to happen, they have to feel safe enough to ask for adjustments. And that might not be something what you can accommodate, but they need to be able to feel safe to share that.
Totally. And you were talking about different generations, and I think that's also a very interesting point that maybe older generations are not so aware, or they might have just lived with neurodiversity for their whole life. But talking about the new generation now, your daughter, which have been diagnosed, so how do you see the perception of having a neurodiversity in her generation?
I find that is still a challenge in terms of, it is still, I would say, a stigma. It's, even though there are a lot of conversations about it, but it is still a stigma. It is a stigma in the college where they mention to her that she's slow to understand things, or that why is she not faster to pick it up, and she has inattentive ADHD, which doesn't mean that she's slow processing information sometimes. Well, that can be one of the challenges, but definitely is in her case. And the other thing is work, in terms of, starting as a freshly graduated person, because there are a whole lot of jobs wouldn't be best suited for. And so, where research shows that girls with ADHD or autism, they already develop a low self-esteem, especially if they are diagnosed late or misdiagnosed for a long time. And so, if, like in my daughter's case, she was diagnosed at 18, by the time she was 18, she had really low self esteem built up because she was told she's not picking up things faster. Why is she struggling with time management? She was getting detention in school because she would struggle with finding one classroom to another in a huge building. And so she comes with that low self esteem already, tries to do just like every other young person, tries to find a weekend job. And what are the opportunities out there? It's really kind of working in a coffee shop. Well, at least in the UK, that's definitely one of them. Helping out, at the reception, or maybe in a restaurant as a waitress. Now, for somebody with time management, perhaps being forgetful, those are not the best suited jobs. And so she had a couple of part-time employments where they sent her away after a couple of months because of the fact that she wasn't able to focus for that long. She would leave, things behind. And it's only recently where she has been working in a restaurant as a waitress, but the lady who owns the restaurant also has ADHD. So she understands my daughter. And instead of giving her a really long shift, she split the shift into two. And so my daughter does two small shifts, and she's able to focus better, and she's better with her work output. But for that, we needed a person who also had neurodiversity to understand it. In an ideal world, that she could speak up, and that would be the case. And there would be more opportunities for young people to enter different internships.
Yeah, so there's a lot of work to do for you to create the awareness and visibility, and also the actions that can be taken. I mean, there are small things, right? Like moving shifts or changing the shifts from one long to two shorter ones, which is a great solution. Work is not impacted, it doesn't cost anything, but it's just something that then suits everyone. And I think that these are the things which are so important to know. And the restaurant owner who has ADHD herself, she realized what's needed.
Exactly.
So now, since you've been at the conference in Paris, when did you hear about supplier diversity and inclusion? How did you get involved with We Connect International and disability?
So I initially was registered with WeConnect and certified because of my IT business, and I kind of was looking out for things, and I put a post out about autism, female autism, and we got into a conversation that there will be, a supplier event, and it would be great if I could give a talk. And WeConnect asked me to send some recommendations around how to adapt the event in order to be more inclusive, and what would help, a neurodiverse individual. And I found that they did a really good job. I have been at a lot of events now, and networking and events are not my favorite, especially if I'm not the keynote speaker or I'm not speaking at any form. If I have to just turn up and engage with people I don't know, and if I don't know anybody, it is a possibility that I don't talk to anybody on that event. And there at WeConnect, I felt like they really worked. They had this great platform where you could, connect with each other and connect with the suppliers and have a 10 minutes, chat. It was reducing that ambiguity. What I fear personally as an autistic person, I don't really like ambiguity and unknown situations, and think networking in huge networking events, that's one of my fears. And so We Connect really supported, kind of did really great adaptations, and it just felt I was already part of it before I even entered the event. And obviously, giving the talk then enabled me to have other comments after the talk.
Yeah, I remember we had like quiet rooms and like I also felt it's a very inclusive event overall.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it's also people who are introverts, not necessarily neurodiverse, that who prefer taking time out. And quite a lot of meetings are only really catering for people who are extroverts and who will go in there and jump in and really enjoy it. Whereas I think there are a lot of people who are introverts and they would, love to attend events. They might be, even business owners, and we are limiting the opportunities there because their events are catered for a certain way.
Yeah. So, is there like a story that you can share where you worked with a client, where you helped them create a more inclusive workplace?
Yes, I think maybe the most recent one we worked with a school called Dover Academy, and we have delivered a parent awareness, but also we delivered a training to the staff. And because of the training to the staff, but also because of the fact that we delivered a parent awareness course, it meant that parents who had neurodiverse children, but they would never talk on the playground to each other because their children were in different year groups. They had this intimate group session where they got to know each other. They really opened up about their challenges, and now they potentially are on a route to form their own support group based on that. And I think I would say that was one of the definitely the big takeaway from empowering them to be able to then take an action for themselves and really support each other. And of course, the staff training, and it's an area where in a school, a Senko might be very knowledgeable on neurodiversity, and of course the staff will be, but having a training where you have real life stories and you're talking to somebody, most of our training facilitators are also neurodiverse. Apart from myself, I work with another 5 training facilitators, and they are all neurodiverse, either having ADHD or autism or another form of neurodiversity. And so we always weave into the training, not just the inclusion, but that we are trying to drive here empathy through stories. And so that people are really open to receive that, knowledge, and they walk away and feeling like they are champions as well to the cause. And that really makes a difference, I feel.
Yeah, that's very impressive because I think communication and talking about it and not seeing it as a taboo. So I think that's very important. But you also mentioned an interesting point, which I want to pick up, is a form of neurodiversity. There are so many different faces. It's not just what we talked about. Maybe you can share some more forms.
So I think when we have our inclusion training, the 2 main ones we are always focusing on is autism and ADHD. And then, of course, there is dyslexia, but essentially those 2 main ones share a common fact that people are very good at masking them. So you might not realize that they have it. They might not even realize they have it. And then the second part is that it's just that inclusion bit of how you are opening up to having conversations where you are not necessarily rigid in the way you manage your your employees, or you manage your team, or conversations between 2 people have to be inclusive enough to not to have judgment around that. And so very different adaptations an autistic person would need than versus somebody with ADHD, and that there are some common shared scenarios. For example, somebody with ADHD might struggle with deadlines and reporting, and giving a hard deadline might not work for them because they will procrastinate. There is a tendency to procrastinate till last minute and may or may not deliver based on that. So you breaking down the task into smaller milestones and then checking in might help them to actually deliver on time. Somebody like myself who with autism might prefer to have less meetings, or there are certain times in the day where I feel a bit more having more social energy. So I prefer, meetings till around 2 o'clock and then not so much. And I prefer written communication. That's not even, neurodiversity. There are people with different preference of communication styles, and we should be able to, as a society, allow people to at least air what's their communication style. And maybe we have to find certain compromises. If I'm a leader and I'm autistic and I have to jump on a meeting and there is no other way we can talk about this meeting, then yes. But for example, a lot of the times I wouldn't speak up in the meeting because I need to process the information. I'm quiet. I will then share with you later my insights, my thoughts. And sometimes me not talking in a meeting was perceived as not interested, or maybe I don't have anything to say, or I'm not aggressive enough. We put these labels on. If a male is aggressive, then that's a great thing. And if a woman is being aggressive because she's, aggressive in a way that she's really jumping in and giving her value, it's perceived differently. So an opportunity to say, my preferred communication style is actually in written format. I am going to listen in on this meeting. If I have something urgent to say, I will tell you, but can I share with the people in the meeting my thoughts on an email, or any other form of written style would be a lot of help, for example.
It's the little things that make things different. And I think it's so important that we talk about it. It's so good to hear, all that from somebody who has actually experienced that and who has solutions how to make life easier for everyone, right? So Dina, it's so interesting. I could go on forever, but I want to ask you, what is your call to action?
I think call to action is that there are a lot of things going on in the world, especially in the diversity space and the DI space. I think whatever is going around in the world, it isn't about one characteristics. We need to keep on that mission where people need to feel included and people need to be heard, and we need to look at the environment and the culture of our organizations in a way that is it something what helps people grow, and is it something what help ultimately to drive productivity essentially as well. But people are not productive if they are not happy, and people are not productive if they don't feel safe to talk. And there are a lot of R&D being lost if you are not able to share your ideas, a lot of value being lost. There is a higher turnover. There are a whole lot of cascading issues what could happen. So while there is a potential opportunity to kind of all these initiatives, we need to really see, like, not just from my or our own selfish perspective of being happy at work, but also from a business objective. It is still better to drive inclusion than not.
Totally. And I think that is a great statement for the end of this conversation. If you feel safe in the workplace, if you feel safe in society with being yourself, then everyone wins.
Thank
Edina,
you.
thank you so much for giving all these insights on the workplace, on your company, and on your own personal story.
Thank you for the invite.
If you want to make your supply chain more inclusive, reach out via fipsconsulting.com or Fips Consulting on LinkedIn. Listen to my next episodes where I talk to more experts about supplier diversity and inclusion and the impact it has on their company. Reach out if you have any inputs or topics around supplier diversity and inclusion you want me to talk about. Thanks much for listening, and bye responsible.